Hi there, my name is Dr. Connie Bazarski, and I created this video as a resource for friends and family to hopefully help them understand the new paradigm that you're stepping into with rewiring your limbic system. And then from there, to hopefully even take it one step farther and become an active support in your rewiring process and join what I like to call Team Rewire. So prior to becoming chronically ill, I practiced as a chiropractor for over a decade. After prolonged mold exposure and lots of ongoing stressors, I became chronically ill. I had a long list of debilitating symptoms and many diagnoses that I was told were permanent and would never go away. Things such as chronic inflammatory response syndrome or mold illness, chronic fatigue syndrome, food sensitivities, on and on and on. There truly wasn't an area of my body or a system in my body that wasn't affected by symptoms during this time. Thankfully, in 2016, I was introduced to DNRS, or the Dynamic Neuroretraining System. And this was a very new paradigm for me. Of course, as a chiropractor, I was familiar with the nervous system. However, I was not familiar with the concept of neuroplasticity and how the brain can change for good or for bad, and how it can have a huge impact on our health. One of the things that I found challenging as I stepped into this new paradigm was I found that my friends and family had not stepped into it with me. This often left me feeling isolated, alone, and misunderstood by the people who I wanted to be the closest with. I often found that if I tried to explain what I was doing to them, it didn't go very well. I usually got flustered and overwhelmed very quickly, and then very quickly that turned into me getting triggered. The person that I was trying to explain what I was doing to would usually leave the conversation with more questions than they had at the beginning of the conversation and feeling completely confused. So we never bridged the gap and helped them understand this new paradigm, let alone helping them actually step in to become an active support in it. In the 6 years that I've been coaching others in the process of rewiring their brain to overcome chronic illness, I've noticed that this is a very common pattern, certainly not unique to me in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I've created this video, to help take the burden off of you so that you're not trying to explain this to your friends and family, and instead you have this resource that you can share with them to help them understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and hopefully go even one step farther and join Team Rewire and become an active part in your rewiring process. So I want to take a couple minutes and explain what the limbic system is, because it's fair that most of us have either never heard of the limbic system, or if we have, we're really not sure what it is and what the heck it does. So the limbic system is part of our brain, and one of its main jobs is to keep us safe. And this part of the brain can get impacted by chronic stress or trauma. And when this happens, this part of our brain gets rewired or repatterned into an overprotective and an overreactive state. So I often like to explain this in terms of a house alarm, because that's a concept we're all familiar with. So we all know that a house alarm should go off if someone opens a door or a window unexpectedly. That lets us know that there's a potential threat or some type of danger possibly. Imagine that this house alarm, however, isn't working properly, and it's going off at all kinds of times when it doesn't need to, such as when a bird flies by the window. The alarm also goes off if a squirrel runs on the roof. The alarm goes off if Amazon leaves a package at the front door. So obviously these are times when there's no danger or threat, but the alarm bells are going off anyway. This is very similar to what happens in the brain when the limbic system is impaired. Our limbic system rings these alarm bells in the brain, indicating that there's danger or threat, even when there isn't. Now, of course, these alarm bells don't ring in the brain in a vacuum. This, of course, has an impact on our body and the rest of our system. When those alarm bells in the brain go off, the limbic system signals the nervous system to go into fight, flight, or freeze. And the challenge is these alarm bells are not only going off too often, they're often going off for too high of a time and at too loud of a volume. So because these alarm bells are going off too often and at too big of an intensity and staying on too long for the situation, it tends to put us into a state of chronic fight, flight, or freeze. And our bodies are not meant to stay there long term. Those states are meant to be short term to get us to safety. When we are in chronic fight, flight, or freeze, it sets the stage for a whole host of imbalances in the body and a whole host of symptoms can start to show up. The good news is that this part of the brain can be rewired. We can reset the alarm system, so to speak, so that the alarm starts to go off when it's supposed to, at the appropriate volume that it's supposed to go off at, and for the appropriate amount of time given the situation. As we rewire this alarm bell in the brain, it allows the nervous system to get back to its normal state of rest and repair, and the body to get back into balance where healing can occur. So one of the first big paradigm shifts that we step into with rewiring the limbic system is changing our language. And this is the first place that you all can really help the person that you love with rewiring their limbic system. So we want to look at stopping to talk about symptoms and illness. Not just their symptoms and illness, but actually refraining from talking about anyone's symptoms or illness. And I know this might seem weird at first. Please understand, first and foremost, it's not a denial of illness. The symptoms are real. I can attest to just how real and just how miserable the symptoms are. What it is it's taking advantage of how the brain works. So there's a very big difference, first of all, between saying something is based in the brain versus something is in someone's head. And I just want to be really clear that I'm not saying that this is in anyone's head. What I am saying is this is brain-based. I also want to be clear that we're not just crossing our fingers and saying, if I don't talk about it, I hope it'll go away. Again, we're taking advantage of how the brain works. And when we talk about symptoms or illness, it very quickly lights up the pathways in the brain that get those alarm bells ringing. Now, it's fair that this is a big change for everybody. It just makes sense that the main topic of conversation when someone's been chronically ill is symptoms. Usually we're trying to figure out, how in the world did we get here? How do we get out of this? And how do we fix this whole big mess? So it's so supportive if friends and family can agree, we're all going to stop talking about symptoms. We're all going to step away from talking about illness to help your loved one step into this new paradigm. One of the things that you all can do to, again, help with this is refrain from asking your loved one, how are you? Again, I know that this can sound really weird. Hear me out. So most of us have been told that how are you or how are you doing is a way to express care and concern. And certainly if someone's not feeling well, we want to check in and see how they're doing. The challenge is when someone's limbic system is impaired, asking how are you very quickly gets that person focused on their symptoms and talking about them. So you can take that phrase out of your language for now, and maybe instead you could say, what's going well for you today? What are you looking forward to today? Good morning, I love you. Or I'm so happy to see you, it's really great to see you today. So just by making that little change in your language, again, you can actively help to support your loved one to not talk about symptoms. It's also really helpful if friends and family can agree to refrain from talking about negative topics in general. And again, I know that this can seem odd. It can seem very Pollyanna-ish. It can seem like we're just trying to stick our head in the sand and pretend like there's nothing bad happening in the world and nothing challenging happening in our lives. First of all, please remember that this is for a period of time. It's not forever. And second of all, remember, we're trying to turn off those alarm bells in the brain. And so if we talk about topics that are scary or sad or upsetting, it very quickly gets those alarm bells ringing in the brain. So we want to start to really look at how can we shift what we're talking about to focus more on positive things to help to calm those alarm bells down. Now, of course, there's going to be times when we do need to have a challenging conversation. It's fair that life isn't always just sunshine and rainbows, and sometimes we do need to have a difficult conversation. It's also fair that there's probably going to be times when you need to talk about symptoms and maybe figure out what the next step is with a practitioner or a treatment protocol. And we'll cover this more in my class, Team Rewire, to talk about how can you do this in a way that doesn't ring those alarm bells as much as possible. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, please check out my website, conniebcoaching.com, where you can find out more about the services I offer, as well as my Team Rewire class. Team Rewire is meant to be a class for friends and family that provides quick, easy to understand information and things that you can start implementing right away to not only understand this new paradigm, but to also become an active support in the rewiring process. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.